This is Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell on the Forge Audio Network.
What's up, Forge fans? Welcome back to another episode. Today is November 6th. I'm your host, Mackenzie Barwell, here to give you all things Forge FC. It's been just over a week now since the CPL final, so we've officially entered the postseason, which means, as I've said before, the audio network will look a little different. So going forward for this next while, you can expect an episode a week, primarily on Mondays. I'll check in with members of Forge FC, see what they're getting up to in the off-season, and how, of course, they feel about their fourth championship. Today, though, I asked Charlie O'Conner Clarke to hop on again to get his thoughts on the championship match and then the 2023 season more generally, as Forge now look ahead to that CONCACAF Champions Cup. So another big thanks to Charlie for joining me, and enjoy today's episode. Charlie, welcome back. Thank you for continuing to do this podcast with me.
No problem. That sounds like you've forced me to, but no, I'm happy to.
Well,
happy to be here.
All right, this isn't against your will. Let me just get that out there.
100%.
We briefly talked about it, but do you kind of not know what to do with yourself now that the season's over?
Yeah. Last week, we had like a couple days of stuff to sort out after the final, go through some things, and then the end of the week was kind of, well, actually, okay, that's not true. We had like other stories in the end of the week, like Joao Morelli and things like that, which helped me remember that I have a job. But now it's like, well, we kind of need more teams to start doing some more off-season stuff is going to start soon, but it's very, very different than, there's a game every weekend. And the playoffs get crazy, and then all of a sudden it's over. It's like, well, now what?
It's kind of like 0 to 100 kind of thing, or maybe 100 to 0 is the better way to put it.
100 to 0, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I think last week was different because we were all kind of like doing our final thoughts. Now it's Monday, a week later, and we're all like, now what?
Exactly.
I want to start by opening up the conversation by looking back on our few interactions during the final, because we were both pitch side, and almost every single time I saw you, you were like in utter shock. Like every time.
In extra time, at least. Yeah.
In extra time. That's true. And maybe toward the end of the second half. I think you said a couple times this is one of the best CPL finals that we've ever had.
Oh, yeah.
Or if not the best CPL final we've had. So, can you talk a little bit about what was going through your head, why this one was so special?
Well, for a lot of it, specifically a very small part of extra time, especially, I was like, I'm gonna be right. Because I'd been saying all week that this game was going to penalties.
Yes.
And for a very, very, very long time, I was like, wow, I'm gonna be so right, especially when it was 1-1. Because I like 0-0 going to penalties. I was like, okay, I was kind of right, because I said 1-1 all week, and then Batty Banga scored. I'm like, let's go. This is what's happening. 1-1. But then Tristan Borges is like, you're not allowed to have that.
Yeah.
I'm not giving you that prediction. So thanks, Tristan. Appreciate it. But I don't begrudge him that, because if you're gonna score a goal and make me wrong, I'd prefer it to be awesome like that. You watch some 0-0 games, like the last time Forge and Cavalry played at Tim Hortons Field in the season, and it was kind of boring at times, kind of a dull, cagier game. And especially if you told me that the final was going to be 0-0 and go to extra time, and be like, wow, that's going to be a terrible game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's going to be both teams kind of not opening up their little cagey. But it's not true.
No.
In this game, right? Like, we don't go to extra time if Tristan Henry doesn't stand on his head like at least twice in this game. There's one, I think, unreal save on Jesse Daly that sent it to extra time, and then once we got there, I mean, it got crazy. I mean, as soon as Cavalry scored, Forge were like, all right, we've been behind a lot of times this season before, so they clearly weren't worried at all.
Yeah.
They put the ball down, and every player you ask, they're like, yeah, we just put the ball down and went to work, and we're confident we can score at least one to get us to penalties. And then obviously they didn't just score one. They didn't go to penalties. They are more interested in getting it done there. But yeah, it was such a weird feeling to see kind of the energy shift. I was like right between the benches, right, where you see all the Cavalry coaching staff and players running down to the corner and a Forge score, and they're like not quite as energetic when they scored, I think. It wasn't equalizer, so it wasn't like they'd gone ahead and I think
that is so true, actually, now that I think about it, because I was constantly like turning my head to see what Tommy was doing, and then I look back and see what Bobby's doing, and yeah, there's definitely a difference in terms of the reaction to both goals. Did you notice Forge's kind of mentality shift after that first Cavalry goal? Like you said, it didn't look like they were beaten down at all. It was just ball back at half and we go. Did you see that?
Yeah, I think it kind of. I mean, I've seen it more on watching replays of the goal because when it happened, I was kind of focused on that insane, Cavalry celebration. All that energy was there. But when you look at it, like, if you're Forge in that moment, you can't. You're not really that upset because you didn't do anything wrong, really. It's just like a ball gets loose and at the top of the box always happens, and then one of the best players in the league scores a screamer.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, like that we had to expect that might happen at some point in this game. It kind of sucks that it happened at this point of the game where it's in the middle of extra time, but all you do is you just don't get your head down, you don't get your shoulders down, you walk back to half, you wait for them to finish their celebration in the corner, and you get down and play. You still had, like, at that point, I think 20 minutes to score a goal.
Yeah.
And this season, you just think about how many times Forge had to come from behind this year. They played 14 home games in the regular season. I think they scored first in 3 of them, right?
Yeah. And they scored equalizers in 9.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they were in this position so many times this year. Like, the first game that they played this season was Cavalry at Tim Hortons Field. Cavalry took the lead, I think, twice. And both times Forge scored within like 10 minutes, right? So like this
Right.
maybe should have been expected. Maybe you don't. I don't want to say that they manufactured these goals because they didn't. Like, Batty Banga scores from outside the box, Forge scores from Olympico, but they definitely felt like it was at least one goal was going to come because they've seen that happen so many times this year and they have a lot of faith in themselves.
Yeah, like you said, this is not an unfamiliar situation for them. They've done it time and time again. But I think not only were they not panicked about scoring an equalizer, but in talking to Bobby and talking to Kyle and some of the other players, they actually said maybe that overtime Cavalry goal was what they needed to kind of get the fire started. Sounds weird, but I think maybe it was beneficial in a way to have them open up the scoring.
Yeah. I mean, I do think, like, obviously it's crazy to be like, a goal that we conceded in extra time helped us because almost always in soccer, if you concede in extra time, you're losing that game.
You're done.
It's done. You're over. Because it's so hard to score in those situations. But if a team takes a lead in extra time, they're going to put like 5 guys across the goal line. You're not getting anywhere close to them.
And didn't you say, Charlie, between the matchups with Cavalry and Forge this entire season, the team who scores first has, I think, always won?
I think so. Or it's at least, like, I don't think they've ever lost.
Right. Right.
We've talked a lot this year about how Forge have that extra gear, and for some reason this year, so many times it's taken a bit of a wake-up call for them to find it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you punch Forge in the face, they come back way harder. And it happened on so many occasions.
That's a crazy analogy. That is a crazy analogy.
If they get hit, they hit you back. And sometimes, like, they don't always hit first.
Yeah.
Right? And it happened so many times this year that the best like 10-minute stretches Forge would have this season would be when they were losing by a goal, and they come back and they find it, and then they'd be like, okay, we're good, we can handle the situation, and it obviously served them extremely well in this game. And I guess maybe that's the story, is that it's like they won this game the way that they've been picking up results all year, and that's probably an immense credit to them. It's not necessarily, I'm sure if you ask Bobby, that's not how he would want to be winning games. He would much prefer to score first and then score second and then score again and see a game out and be like, that's it. But he knows that, there's so much buy-in in this team that they don't get their heads down when they fall behind, and they have a lot of belief that they can do that. And obviously the record speaks for itself.
That's another thing that I wanted to ask you about too, Charlie, because I think a lot of what we've talked about this season has been how Forge in 2023 hasn't necessarily played in their conventional way. And a lot of the times we're highlighting the differences in what we've seen from them this season versus previous seasons. But like you said, there is that common theme where they're always able to buy in, pick their head up, continue playing. What are some other similarities or maybe consistencies, having covered the league for 5 years now, that you've seen from Forge that have allowed them to, put themselves in a position to win another championship despite maybe an irregular season?
Well, I think the one thing that I guess, again, also helped them in this game is how good this organization is at integrating players, especially new players. I mean, last year we saw some players come in a little bit, like a few games, a few weeks into the season. I think Rezart Rama came in maybe a month and a half or so into last season, then slowly found his way into the side and became a really important player. I mean, even Alessandro Hojabrpour that year. And this year, I mean, this game isn't won without Benny Badibanga on the pitch, right? And he comes in mid-season and so quickly hits the ground running with this club, and is a difference maker down the stretch, especially at times when some of their, historically more consistent difference makers maybe go through slightly rougher patches, right? Maybe have tougher years. Maybe some players like David Chouanier gets hurt. Tristan Borges, has some injuries. Maybe isn't in the best form of his career. Even Wubens Passius and Terry Campbell go through kind of up and down stretches. And for somebody like Badibanga to come in and understand so quickly what it means to be a Forge player and what is required of him by Bobby and by the staff, and what he needs to do to fit into that team, that's kind of indicative of what Forge have done with new players over 5 years. Really, probably better than any other team in the CPL.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, this is my first season with Forge, and even hearing you say that Rama came in last season seems so bizarre to me, because
right,
if I walk into this club and with no prior knowledge, I would have just assumed that everyone's been there for years and years and years.
Yeah.
So really good point, actually. And even Benny too.
Well,
I saw him come in and
I think it's actually like crazy when you think about how many players in this year's squad were new last year, because I feel like they've been. I mean, Malik, I think, came in last year. Noah Jensen came in last year. He's a player who started this final.
that blows my mind. That actually blows my mind.
I think Kwesi Poku came in last year, and he started this final. There's just so many players that become so integral to this group. I mean, we talk a lot about the consistency and winning over 5 years, but I think there's 5 or 6 players that have been, with the club for every championship. Tristan Borges missed one because he wasn't in PEI, but there are the core players, like your Kyle Beckers, even your Dominic Samuel comes into this game, Tristan Henry, obviously. But there's a lot of players that have come in and joined this group.
Right. One other thing I wanted to talk about and get your opinion on was Tommy Wheeldon Jr.'s comments in that pre-championship match press conference about how, they've achieved what they wanted to. They set out to do something the club has never done before, which was dominate in those 28 games and take home the regular season title. Obviously, they ultimately don't get the championship. Going into the 2024 season, do you feel that Cavalry will kind of still have that chip on their shoulder with Forge, even though Tommy had kind of laid it out saying they had already accomplished what they wanted to? Tommy called it a final curse when he talked to KJ after the final.
Yeah, I definitely think it will eat at them a little bit to see them like this. And they are, it'll take them a little bit. And maybe they're starting to feel it a little bit more now, that they are going to look back on this season as a success for them again, and they're going to be in CONCACAF, which was a huge priority, as it was for Forge at the start of the year, right? And I think maybe maybe the next step for them after that is going to be winning that trophy, ideally for them probably by beating Forge, because it has now happened. They've lost to Forge in the playoffs 3 times. In over full seasons, and I guess I think they lost them in PEI as well, but that's a little bit different. And it is going to hurt them. That is going to hurt them, and I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch next year, because obviously Cavalry will have felt like this was the year for them to do that, because they were better than Forge in the season series, right, in the regular season. I think that 3-0 game at Spruce Meadows was really the only lopsided Forge Cavalry game I've ever seen. And I think that, I mean, the other thing is I think Cavalry actually played very well in the final. And they were very close. And that's what's going to be so painful, because they know how hard it is to get to the final and to be that close to winning it, to be leading in extra time and playing very well for a lot of the 90 minutes. That is going to eat at them. So I would not be surprised to see them back. At least in contention in the playoffs next year, but that is maybe going to be their next step and the next gauge that they have for their own success is to, obviously they want to be consistent in the regular season again, but they also, maybe they won't say it out loud as much because it's a little bit of more of a personal thing, but they desperately do want to beat Forge in the playoffs, when it really comes down to it,
Mhm.
because they will not. A lot of them were still on the pitch, standing on the field, watching Forge lift that trophy.
Okay, I noticed that too, actually, and I was confused if that was a respect thing, like that's just something that you do after. I thought it was so interesting that they watched them lift it, and then immediately after, everyone turned around and walked out.
Yeah. So you see this sometimes in sports, and sometimes it's a player choosing it themselves. Sometimes it's a coach wanting your players to. And I know Tommy Whelan Jr. has a lot of respect for like basketball and football coaches, and you hear a lot of talk sometimes about how, if you lose a final and you know how hard it was to get to there, you watch the other team lift it and think about, how much it hurts to watch that team lift it and how much you want to be back and doing that next year. Right? It's one of those, remember this feeling, take a mental picture of this moment, remember how much you hate this moment, and let that fuel you to not have this feeling again.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is something that motivates a lot of people. Right. I think that's kind of fair.
Yeah, but like you said, very well played game by them, and ultimately it comes down to 3 goals that were arguably out of everyone else's control.
Pretty much that's the problem.
You also talk about those CONCACAF spots. Obviously, now with the new playoff format in the CPL, both Cavalry and Forge will get one. Can you just touch on what you think this tournament will do for either team, but also like what kind of things each team will bring?
I cannot wait for this tournament. It is going to be amazing. It might be hilarious. It depends who our CPL teams draw, but they could draw like huge Mexican giants, Club America, Tigres, Chivas,
Yeah.
Guadalajara. Make them come to Hamilton and Calgary in February. They're gonna hate it. It's gonna be hilarious.
Yeah, they're like, where are we?
I remember watching, like, when Toronto FC had that long Champions League run, and they had all those Mexican teams come up to BMO Field mostly in March, and you would see the players come out for like maybe 5 minutes max of warm up, wearing their winter coats, and you're like, oh, those Mexican teams are going to lose this game. Both teams, Forge and Cavalry, will want to draw the hardest possible team. Unfortunately, they can't draw Inter Miami and Lionel Messi in the first round, but if they advance, then they can do that. But this is going to be exciting. Both these teams want to be in this competition. They want to test themselves against the best, and Forge know what it's like to carry the Canadian flag on the international stage, right? And that's exactly what they're going to want to do. And I honestly cannot wait for this tournament, because it's going to be crazy. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can see it in your eyes, man. I really can. And even Bobby said with I think CONCACAF changed the structure of the tournament, so ultimately they weren't able to play in it this year. And he said he noticed that there's a big change or shift in even the momentum of the team having that experience in the off season together, coming into another CPL season. It does a lot. Yeah, what do you see?
Yeah.
What do you see Forge bringing to the table this year?
I'm not sure. I mean, it'll be an interesting offseason. I don't really anticipate huge changes in the squad, because obviously you've got that that carrot. If you stick around here, you might play against a huge, one of the biggest clubs in North America. You might play in one of the biggest or most historic stadiums in North America. You'll have a chance to play against some absolutely incredible players, and players know the opportunity that is for them. But also, I think that the fact that they're in that is also an incentive if they're trying to recruit other players.
Yeah.
Right. For Forge and Cavalry, the fact that you're there and you can say to I mean, I think when Forge signed Hajabrafor and Terran Campbell, it was pretty shortly before they were playing Cruz Azul in the Champions League, right? And those players probably liked that opportunity, liked the idea of going to play in the Azteca for Terran and Ali. And I think it is obviously a huge recruitment tool that these clubs use, and it kind of shows how success can breed more success by having that culture and that opportunity that players want to come to. So the next couple of months will probably be pretty interesting in Hamilton and Calgary.
Yeah, winning breeds winning, Charlie. That's a Bobby quote. You pretty much, bro, you almost had it there.
I know. It's been a week and a half. You talked to Bobby more than I do, but I have talked to Bobby for 5 years.
You got me there, bro. I'd like to see Messi pull up to THF, the old Tim Hortons field. I wouldn't mind that.
Who doesn't? I think Forge can beat him in Hamilton in February.
Yeah, can't wait. Okay, Charlie, last question before I let you go. As you know, Tristan Borges Olympico goal just absolutely flooding social media. Okay. to the point where there are so many different versions of this goal and so many different videos with different soundtracks in the back. So which one's your favorite? Because I have a few.
The Celine Dion one's good.
There's a Moneyball one.
I also love the Moneyball one. I love the Moneyball one because I love that movie. And also like the one that huge shout out Media Pro and videographers and everybody that was there catching these very, very beautiful cinematic angles. But the dude that was in the bellows with his phone recording, and you can hear the chant about Tristan Borges, who has scored Olympicos from that exact corner before, and it's just so perfect because they're setting it up. He takes it, turns around, and the guy flips his camera around, and you can just see the section going crazy.
He's like, ah!
And you can see the passion. That is amazing to me as well.
That one is so unreal.
Yeah.
And I've talked about that a few times now, actually, because the timing of that cheer.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Like, I was actually talking about this at the championship celebration because obviously everyone knows the cheer. I couldn't say it at the thing, but just as they finish, it goes in. Oh.
Yeah.
That's a phenomenal.
Shout out to the battalion. That was fantastic.
Shout out the battalion, man. Like, they literally.
Who knows? Maybe they gave Tristan the idea to try it there.
He knew what the people wanted, and he delivered.
He certainly delivered. And then he turns around and just shows them. He's like, "You see that? You see that?"
It's so funny too. You can see the excitement, but then you can see him like, "Wait, I need to be composed."
You can see him like, "Be cool, be cool, be cool."
Yeah.
And that's so funny. It's because he grins and he's like, "Wait." It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
All right, Charlie. Thank you again, as always. I've always enjoyed these conversations, so appreciate you.
No problem.
This has been Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell. If you like what you heard, please like, follow, subscribe, comment, and share.